Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today we're diving into something that's been on my mind with James Gunn's new Superman film on the horizon. Why is Superman, arguably the most iconic superhero ever created, so incredibly difficult to get right on screen? Despite being the character who launched the entire superhero genre back in 1938, Superman has had a remarkably uneven history in film and television. For every soaring success like Richard Donner's Superman the movie or the early seasons of Smallville, there have been polarizing interpretations like Batman v Superman or forgotten missteps like Superman 4: The Quest for Peace. So what makes the Man of Steel such a challenging character to adapt? Today, we'll explore the unique hurdles filmmakers face when bringing Kal-El to life, examine what worked and what didn't in past adaptations, and consider what future Superman projects might need to succeed where others have struggled. Part 1, The Paradox of Power. The first and perhaps most obvious challenge with Superman is the sheer scale of his power. How do you create meaningful stakes for a character who can move planets, survive nuclear blasts, and fly faster than light? This power problem has plagued Superman's stories across all media. In the comics, writers constantly introduce new powers or limitations to keep things interesting. Remember when Superman could somehow project miniature versions of himself? Or when he needed to recharge in a yellow sun chamber? These inconsistencies make adaptation even trickier. Filmmakers typically address this challenge in one of three ways. First, focus on emotional and moral challenges rather than physical ones. In Richard Donner's Superman, the true conflict isn't whether Superman can save Lois from a helicopter. It's his internal struggle with his father's instruction not to interfere with human history versus his desire to save the woman he loves. The central question becomes not, can Superman win, but what should Superman do? Second, introduce kryptonite or other external limitations. Nearly every Superman film relies heavily on kryptonite to level the playing field. Superman Returns, 2006, features an entire island made of the stuff, while Man of Steel, 2013, uses Kryptonian atmosphere to temporarily depower Clark. Third, create villains with comparable power levels. General Zod and his fellow Kryptonians, Doomsday, Nuclear Man, these characters exist primarily to give Superman someone he can punch at full strength. But this approach often leads to third-act CGI destruction fests that many viewers find hollow and repetitive. The problem is that none of these approaches fully solves the power paradox. Emotional challenges alone can feel anticlimactic in a superhero film. Kryptonite becomes a narrative crutch when overused, and matching Superman's power only escalates the destruction, sometimes at the expense of character development. Part 2, The Moral Paragon Problem. Beyond his physical abilities, Superman represents an idealistic moral standard that's increasingly difficult to portray in our cynical, morally complex entertainment landscape. Superman stands for truth, justice, and the American way. But what does that actually mean in today's divided world? What did it mean during World War II versus the Cold War versus post-9/11 America? Each era requires reinterpreting these values while staying true to the character's core. In the Richard Donner films, Christopher Reeve played Superman with earnest sincerity and moral clarity that perfectly fit the character and the era. But as audience tastes shifted toward more morally complex, brooding heroes like the Dark Knight, Superman's straightforward goodness came to be seen by some as outdated or naive. Zack Snyder's interpretation attempted to inject modern complexity by showing a Superman who struggles with his role and the world's reaction to him. While this approach resonated with some fans, others felt it betrayed the character's essential nature as a beacon of hope and optimism. The challenge is creating a Superman who embodies timeless virtues without seeming simplistic, who feels relevant to contemporary audiences without losing what makes the character special. How do you make a morally upright character compelling in an era that often equates moral complexity with depth? Part 3, The Clark Kent Conundrum. Another fundamental challenge lies in the character's dual identity. Unlike Batman, where Bruce Wayne is often considered the mask and Batman the true identity, Superman's relationship with Clark Kent is more complex. Is Clark the disguise that Superman wears? Is Superman the expression of who Clark truly is? Or are they both authentic aspects of Kal-El's identity? Different adaptations have answered these questions differently, leading to radically different portrayals. Christopher Reeve masterfully distinguished between the two personas. His Clark was bumbling and insecure, while his Superman was confident and authoritative. It was a theatrical approach that worked brilliantly for those films. Smallville focused primarily on Clark before he became Superman, exploring his journey toward accepting his destiny. Henry Cavill's Clark in the DCEU was more grounded, less the fumbling reporter, and more a man seeking his place in the world. Tyler Hoechlin in Superman and Lois portrays a Clark who's weathered life's challenges and found balance as both a superhero and a family man, showing yet another interpretation. Getting this balance right is crucial because the Clark-Superman dynamic speaks to the character's most relatable themes: the immigrant experience, finding one's identity, balancing personal desires with responsibility, and the universal experience of presenting different sides of ourselves to the world. Part 4, The Weight of Iconography. Superman isn't just a character, he's a cultural icon loaded with decades of symbolism and expectations. The S-Shield is one of the most recognizable symbols in the world, even among people who've never read a comic or seen a Superman film. This creates a unique burden for filmmakers. Everyone has their own idea of what Superman should be, often based on their first exposure to the character. For many, Christopher Reeve will always be the definitive Superman, making any new interpretation an uphill battle. The character carries religious undertones, the father sending his only son to Earth to save humanity, that filmmakers must either embrace, as Snyder did with his messianic imagery, or downplay. Superman also represents America itself in many ways: its values, its contradictions, its exceptional power, and its responsibilities. This makes every Superman film a statement not just about the character, but about American identity. Changing any element of this iconic character, from his costume to his catchphrases to his powers, risks alienating portions of the audience. Yet failing to bring fresh elements to the character risks creating something that feels like a museum piece rather than a living, breathing hero. Part 5, The Comparison Trap. Superman was created in 1938 and defined the superhero archetype, but the genre he pioneered has evolved dramatically, particularly in recent decades. Today's superhero landscape is filled with morally complex characters like Tony Stark, subversive anti-heroes like Deadpool, and psychologically tortured figures like Batman. Against this backdrop, Superman can seem like a relic from a simpler time. His straightforward heroism and clean-cut image contrast sharply with the darker, edgier heroes who now dominate popular culture. Filmmakers face a difficult choice. Should they adapt Superman to fit modern superhero conventions, or should they embrace his distinctive qualities, even if they seem out of step with current trends? Zack Snyder chose the former approach, crafting a more introspective, alienated Superman who grapples with the burden of his powers. While this interpretation found passionate supporters, it also sparked backlash from those who felt it missed the character's essential optimism and inspirational nature. Meanwhile, Superman and Lois has found success by embracing traditional aspects of the character while updating the context, placing Superman's hopefulness against the backdrop of small-town America's real struggles. The comparison extends beyond other heroes to Superman's own rogues gallery. Unlike Batman's psychologically rich villains or Spider-Man's personal connections to his enemies, Superman's villains are often criticized as one-dimensional. Lex Luthor, his most famous adversary, has been portrayed with varying degrees of success, but filmmakers have struggled to make his obsession with Superman feel justified and compelling. Part 6, Serving Too Many Masters. Any Superman film must satisfy multiple constituencies with different, sometimes contradictory expectations. Hardcore comic book fans who know decades of lore and continuity, casual viewers whose primary reference point might be older films or TV shows, studio executives looking for franchise potential and merchandising opportunities, critics who may dismiss superhero films as childish unless they transcend the genre, international audiences who may not share American cultural context, children drawn to the colorful, aspirational aspects of the character, and adults seeking sophisticated storytelling and subtext. Each of these groups wants something different from Superman. Comic purists might demand fidelity to specific storylines, while studio executives want something fresh that can launch a franchise. International audiences might not connect with Superman as an American icon, while children and adults have vastly different tolerance levels for complexity and darkness. This creates a nearly impossible task. Make Superman too light and playful, and critics dismiss it as childish. Make him too dark and complex, and you risk losing what makes the character special. Stick too close to comics continuity, and you confuse casual viewers. Deviate too much, and dedicated fans cry foul. Part 7. The Technological Challenge. Superman's abilities present unique technical challenges. His flight, his heat vision, his super speed all require visual effects that, until relatively recently, were difficult to execute convincingly. The famous tagline from the 1978 film was, "You'll believe a man can fly." That was the fundamental promise, that technology had finally advanced enough to make Superman's powers believable on screen. And for its time, it delivered spectacularly. But audience expectations continually evolve. What impressed viewers in 1978 looks quaint today. Each new Superman production must push technical boundaries to make his godlike abilities feel authentic and awe-inspiring. Moreover, Superman's greatest feats in comics are often on a scale that's difficult to portray, even with modern CGI, without looking excessive or numbing the audience with destruction. How do you show a character moving planets or flying through stars without losing human connection? Part 8. The Path Forward. So with all these challenges, what might work for future Superman adaptations? First, the most successful portrayals have emphasized Superman's humanity over his alienness. Despite his Kryptonian origins, Superman was raised as Clark Kent in Kansas. His powers make him extraordinary, but his values and emotional connections make him relatable. Second, Superman works best as an inspirational figure. This doesn't mean he can't face doubt or difficulty, but his story is ultimately one of hope. The hope that power can be used for good, that people can be trusted, that we can aspire to be better. Third, Superman's supporting cast is essential. Lois Lane, Jimmy Olsen, Perry White, Ma and Pa Kent. These characters provide both grounding and contrast. They highlight Superman's humanity while giving him a community worth protecting. Fourth, the best Superman stories give him challenges that can't be solved with physical power alone. Moral dilemmas, emotional conflicts, complex choices, these force the character to develop beyond his role as a living battering ram. Finally, filmmakers need to embrace what makes Superman distinctive rather than trying to force him into templates established by other superheroes. His optimism, his clarity, his inspirational quality, these aren't weaknesses to be fixed, but essential aspects to be celebrated. Superman remains the archetype, the original template from which all other superheroes evolved, but like any archetype, he's both timeless and challenging to modernize. His greatest strength as a character, his clear moral compass and incredible power create the very narrative challenges that filmmakers struggle to overcome. Yet when creators successfully navigate these difficulties, Superman can still soar as he did in his earliest appearances. As James Gunn prepares to bring us a new vision of the Man of Steel, I'm curious, what do you think makes for a great Superman adaptation? What's your favorite portrayal of the character and why? Let me know in the comments below. And remember what Superman himself stands for: hope. In our complex, often cynical world, there's something powerful about a character who reminds us of our better nature, who inspires us to look up in the sky with wonder rather than suspicion. That's it for today's video. If you enjoyed this exploration of Superman on screen, please hit that like button, subscribe for more content, and share your thoughts below. Until next time.